Welcome to video 6. As I said in the introduction, I'm primarily aiming this course at intermediate level web developers, those who have at least a basic familiarity with PHP and concepts like object-oriented programming and MVC. While I won't be focusing on absolute basics, like how to create an object or what the this variable is, my aim is to demonstrate through code how an OOP and MVC-based system might be put together. My goal is to show a real-world OOP and MVC example, something that you can create as you follow along with this course, and potentially extend in the future based on the concepts that you learn in these videos. One of my biggest challenges when I first started learning about object-oriented programming wasn't the basics, like how to create an object, but how an object might be used within the scope of an entire web app and how individual objects work together. All that said, let me give you a brief reminder regarding what these terms are, why I like using OOP and MVC, and why you might consider using them in your own projects if you aren't already. Let's start with OOP. OOP, or Object-Oriented Programming, is a design philosophy that recommends your code be built as a series of individual objects. OOP is all about modular code that takes advantage of things like encapsulation, polymorphism, and inheritance to increase code reuse and decrease code maintenance. OOP revolves around a construct called a class, which are the templates that are used to create objects. Objects are used to represent the data in your application and what types of operations, functions, can be performed on that data. Programmers can use OOP to form relationships between objects. For example, in this course, we're going to be creating a variety of objects to help us build our e-commerce system. These include things like a database object, which we created in an earlier video, which connects to our database and allows us to retrieve data. There's also going to be a template object, which is used within the MVC system to display views and to pass data and alert messages from our controllers to our views. We're going to create a categories object, which will be used to handle anything related to product categories. We'll also be creating a products object, which will be used to handle retrieving and displaying product information. And finally, we'll also be creating a cart object, which is used to create a shopping cart and perform functions like adding, removing, or editing items in the cart. Not everyone uses OOP in exactly the same way. In my case, I like OOP because it gives me a simple way to group related functionality. It gives me a way to place related code together, also called encapsulation, so it's easier for me to find, easier for me to modify, and easier for me to reuse in future projects. I also find that it makes my code cleaner and easier to scan. Hopefully you'll see what I mean as we proceed. Next, MVC. MVC stands for Model View Controller. It's a common design pattern that can be used to structure your web application, separating the business logic from the presentation. It breaks down a web application into three main components. First, the model. Models represent your data and the functions that can be performed on that data. Then we have the view. These are files that are displayed to the user. They contain the user interface. And finally, the controller. The controller is the brain of your application. They retrieve input from the user, access models as necessary to get the data they need, pass the model's data to the view, and then choose when and how to display the view to the user. Basically, they control the logic and flow of your application. This is a pattern that you may already be familiar with, you just don't know it yet. For a simple example, say a user loads a web page in a web browser. The web browser, the controller, gets the URL from the user, which is the input. It uses that URL to decide what HTML data it needs to get, the model, and then displays that data to the user using CSS for styling, the view. The MVC design pattern is quite popular and is used extensively by a large number of programming languages. If you intend to continue increasing your programming knowledge and look into other languages, you'll find that almost all modern languages support OOP and can use the MVC design pattern. I've recently begun learning about Objective-C development, so I can create iPhone, iPad, and iPod applications, and it uses OOP and MVC extensively. I like the MVC model because it helps me organize my files, especially if I know that I'll be working on a medium to large web application. Like OOP, it helps me group related functionality together and makes it easier to find and edit my files. Say I need to change how a page displays. I know to either look in the view, if it's HTML data that gets displayed to the user, or in my CSS file, if it's CSS styling. If I need to change the logic of the application, I most likely need to edit the controller. If I need to modify data or how a certain piece of data is retrieved, then I'll probably need to go modify the model. MVC helps me reduce complexity, increase the flexibility and maintainability of my web applications. As a final note, like OOP, people interpret MVC in different ways. I'm not going to claim that one approach is better than any other. I'm simply going to show you how I use it, and as you gain experience working with design patterns and improve your PHP knowledge, I'm sure you will find what works best for you. So that's a brief overview of OOP and MVC. I know these can be complicated concepts to learn, and I hope these concepts will become clearer as you watch this video course and see them in action. By the end of this course, I hope you'll be able to apply what you've learned to extend this e-commerce system or add OOP and MVC to your own applications. If you have any questions regarding MVC or OOP, feel free to contact me at ben@killersites.com or on the Killer Sites forums at killersites.com/community. I've also included a couple resources on OOP and MVC within the resources.txt file that's included with the source code, so make sure to check that out in case it's helpful.